I can't believe they made Tommy a communist. The dang SJWs and their agenda and the Last of Us TV. Oh, God. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? Sadly, I can't imagine. Hello, interwebs! I'm here to review the latest episode of The Last of Us on HBO Max, this time episode 6, Kin. Before we get started, I'm just going to let you all know that this is probably going to be a little bit of a shorter review. Being very frank, this weekend was a bit of an emotional one for me. I won't go into the details. Some of you are probably well aware why. I'm just going to say I am personally doing okay right now. To everyone who sent kind words and thoughts my way, it really did mean a lot, and I read quite a few really kind messages these past few days, so just thank you to anyone who sent them my way. But if you don't know anything about that, that's probably for the best, to be honest with all of you. Let's focus on this review. So first and foremost, just going to say I'm going to go full spoilers for the episode here, though I will save spoilers from the games for the end of the video. So if you want my discussion of how this episode relates to the video game version of the story, I'll talk about it at the end so you won't get any spoilers. But I'll talk full game spoilers at the end here. But anyways, I adored this episode. This was, I think, a nice breath for the show. I think a lot of people have been saying that the show has felt really slow to them, and I certainly understand. It's definitely slower than you would think like a post-apocalyptic video game adaptation show would be, and I personally have no problem with that. I'm loving the pace that the show has had, and I actually really enjoyed this one, even slowed it down more to really hone in on the relationship between Joel and Ellie and how it has evolved since the start of the series. And I think the first element of that was the big jump in time that we get in this episode. And I was a little bit worried about having the 3-month jump because I was like, well, we're going to miss so much of the bonding between Ellie and Joel. And while that does happen in the game, I was sort of like, I wonder how I was going to read differently with the characters now that they're live action. And frankly, I really bought it. Both Pedro and Bella excellently sold that they are characters that have grown in their relationship, but there was not these big necessary conversations that we get to see in this episode that happen there. So they kind of have remained a little closed off in a way that we get to see them finally open up throughout this episode. So I really loved the progression that Bella and Pedro were able to show, but also the elements where they have not grown throughout all of this. And that is wonderfully shown in the first few scenes of the episode where they're like camping together. They're sort of having conversations and sort of getting to know each other a little bit more about like, Ellie sort of opening up about like what she would want to do and things like that, and sort of thinking about becoming an astronaut and sort of like wondering what they would want to be if they could live in an ideal world sort of thing. All of that was really great. And then in those little moments where they do open up to each other and Ellie sort of says like, I tried to save Sam, and had this like hope for him, but he was sort of a childish hope, and sort of again Joel learning that he can't always protect her in these ways, I thought was really just excellent. I also really loved the opening sequence where they're in the cabin with the couple that have been living there for a really long time. First off, that couple, adored them. They were perfect. I love their dynamic of like, yeah, these people are here. We'll deal with them as we deal with them. They just had a great chemistry between the two, and it showcased again what this show has been really excellent about showing, that is differentiating it, I think, from other apocalyptic fiction, which is showing that life still matters in post-apocalypse. You don't really get that in a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction. It's all just sad and dreary, which even the Last of Us games, to a little bit of a degree, especially the first one, really kind of showed. They really kind of had that like, ugh, this all sucks. Part 2 gets better about it. This episode, I think, just showcases like, no, life goes on and there's actually still beauty here and things worth preserving and saving that we saw in episode 3 with Bill and Frank. But here, when we finally get to the commune, where we meet Tommy and his family, it was just, again, it showcased the really beautiful like world that you can create. And I did, frankly, as someone who does sort of lean that way politically, I was like, hell yeah, let's like actually make a communist and show what communism actually is, instead of the vilified like, oh, it's Soviet Russians and dictators and all that jazz. I'm sure the capital G Gamers TM will certainly rant about the SJW agenda with that one, but I thought it was really great because it's true. That's what like actual communism is. And so it was nice to it was funny to hear them say that, especially coming from Craig Mazin, who wrote Chernobyl, so that's kind of fun. Anywho, going forward though, I loved seeing this world that they created. The set design was amazing, and the visuals in this episode freaking gorgeous. But the heart of this was Pedro and Tommy's relationship. Gabriel Luna coming in and playing Tommy, even though we saw him in the first episode, he was excellent here, of selling the history between these two and the shame that they feel for what they've done, but how, Tommy has tried to move on. We've heard that in, I think, episode, what was it? Where Pedro sort of talked about, Tommy being a follower, and he sort of joins up with people, and so there's sort of like Joel was the leader there. We get that from I'm blanking on her name, but Tommy's wife throughout all of this being like, yeah, Tommy was following Joel's lead, and so I liked just getting all of those like the sense of relationship between Tommy and Joel. And the scene between Joel and Tommy where Joel opens... the first scene between Joel and Tommy where Tommy sort of says, like, I have a family. You can see that Joel is angry at him because of what it means for him, that he doesn't get to have that anymore. And also his fear of his failure that he's just been going through this whole episode of, like, he constantly feels like he has failed everyone in his life and doesn't want to let them down. I thought was really, really cool. But the second scene where he opens up and he is very, very clear about... I feel this failure and I am scared, and that's why I want you to take her, because I feel like I'm going to fail her, but it's his own fear. It's his own fear that he's going to screw something up that is, preventing him from going on with Ellie. And I love that Ellie hears this and calls him out. And I want to make a note here. One of the things that I hate the most in fiction, it's a common trope in fiction, where a character hears another character say something and hears them out of context and then gets upset at them later. So they'll just say, like a character will say, I hate, Fred, and then Fred will be listening at the door and be like, oh, he hates me, and then go away. And then the next thing, when he's not, like, just coughing. Like, it'll be like, there'll be, like, a missing piece of context that they don't have. But I like that Ellie is upset at Joel after listening to him because of the full context. She is actually mad at him for what he said, not because she is missing some context. She is mad at him because, she would be afraid, and she sees him abandoning her when they had just started opening up and bonding. And he tries to reject that by saying, you're not my daughter, and I'm not your father. But then he has to, over the night, come to reckon with the fact that he is actually forming this bond with her and has a feeling of responsibility to her. So I loved that sense there, but I think the core thing too is just his absolute fear that he is going to fail Ellie specifically. So that mixture of responsibility, but also his fear of failure, which I think will be driving him as a character going forward. If I had any knock at this episode really overall, was there was a constant little buildup of like, oh, there's the Valley of Death, there's the clickers, and so maybe it's not a buildup necessarily of like, maybe what they were trying to do with that, and maybe that's actually a good thing, is to show like, not everyone has every information. Everyone's like, oh, there's a lot of clickers along the way, there's going to be a lot of enemies that you're going to have to fight, and actually there's not. Because people are just sort of getting their information piecemeal, and things have changed. So the River of Death didn't matter. So I actually kind of like that. What I didn't like as much was more the end of the episode, where I loved seeing the university they visit. It felt right out of the games. I love seeing the abandonment. I love seeing the monkeys. That was great. But it felt a little bit rushed. I would have loved to see that section a little bit more, instead of just like trying to get to the beats of like, let's get Joel injured, and then we can sort of get on to the end of the episode so that we can sort of see what happens next in the story. I think that all of that was a little bit rushed for me, and a little bit lukewarm. I think, I don't know, the episode was already really long, but I think you could have extended that a little bit further. And then we get to the end of the episode, and I loved that Ellie's like, I need you. She's afraid that Joel's going to abandon her again because he's going to die, at least she thinks. And sort of we have that cliffhanger. So I loved the sort of like ending on that note, considering it was the whole theme of the episode. But this brings us to where I'm going to talk spoilers for the game. So if you want no spoilers for the future of the series or from the games themselves or the game version of the story, you can jump off here because I will talk spoilers for the game. I loved the line where Ellie is talking about the wind turbine, the generator of the power plant. I'm blanking on the word for some reason. And she says, "Oh, you could have told me anything, I would have believed you." because that is a direct reference to what's going to happen presumably at the end of the season, but definitely happened in the game, where Joel saves Ellie's life, but takes away her ability to consent, and also the ability for her to save all of humanity. Though, to be fair, the Fireflies are also taking away consent as well. But anyways, he doesn't allow her a choice in the matter. And then he lies to her about it. And, we learn in Last of Us Part 2, she believes it, at least consciously. I also loved seeing the town. The town was straight out of Last of Us Part 2. That was great. Also, the girl who is checking Ellie out for a quick minute there. I'm like, oh, I know who that is if you played Last of Us Part 2. So all those are like nice little Easter eggs and nods throughout all of that. I also liked the fact that Joel says one of his dreams would be to own a little farm, a ranch, and own sheep, which is exactly what we see Ellie getting to do in Last of Us Part 2, but she gives that up in her search for revenge for Joel. I think that'll add a nice layer of pain to Last of Us Part 2 when we finally do get to that storyline in the series. I think that'll be like, oh, she has what he wants, but that's what reminds her of wanting to go and get revenge for Joel. I think it'll be kind of a nice stab in the heart moment, just referring all the way back here. So that's some nice setup going forward for that. I thought that was really great. And then we also have the astronaut reference as well, that Ellie likes astronauts, which will also probably lead into a scene that we'll see next season or the season after. If you play Last of Us Part 2, it's one of the best moments in that whole game. So yeah, all of this was an excellent episode. Very slower, emotionally resonant one, but I think a necessary one for our characters and our story. And I just, again, shout out to the beautiful visuals. This episode was gorgeous. So yeah, that's all my thoughts on this one. I'm sure there's a couple things that I missed, but again, apologies. It's I'm a little bit tired. It's been a long weekend. And I'll just reiterate again, thank you for all the kind words and messages. That was very appreciated. For anyone who sent a nice comment, DM, email. It meant a lot. It really did. Like I said, I'm doing okay. I will probably talk about it at some other point. But for now, I'm doing good. And that is in large part to all of you being amazing and kind. So to all of you who care, heart to you. To the rest of you, you're probably like, what is she talking about? That's for the best. Don't worry about it. But just know I appreciate you either way. And I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper. Mwah.